Denver Broncos linebacker Dre Greenlaw exited Thursday's practice with an injury. And we'll tell you, even though Sean Payton believes he's fine, the Broncos, they have to pay very close attention to the linebacker position going forward. We'll share our thoughts on that. How much more on today's episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Broncos Country? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We know it's your team every day for all your Broncos news, content, coverage, analysis, more. This is the place to be. Become an everydayer by subscribing to us wherever you get your podcasts or watching us on YouTube here for all your Broncos news, content, coverage, and more. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter from Mile High Sports, joined as always by Sayre Bedinger, site expert over there at predominantlyorange.com, and Dre Greenlaw exiting Thursday's training camp practice with an apparent injury. And really, that's going to be the theme of today. I think this is a big story here for the Broncos. We'll go through why Denver needs to be very cautious with how they approach this position going forward. We'll also highlight why Bo Nix and the Broncos offense shined during practice and a couple of the key standouts there, including Pat Bryant. But then we're going to go through some news and notes here for the Broncos as well, with Devon Vele returning to practice after missing Wednesday's practice initially. And Denver putting a young undrafted rookie free agent on injured reserve. We'll break all that down on Locked On Broncos. Sayre, early on in practice, obviously for the Broncos, following a very physical day on Wednesday, Thursday's practice was a little bit lighter by design because you don't want to run guys into the ground. So the Broncos got some competitive periods going on, one-on-ones, receivers and corners and safeties on one side of the field. And then on the other side, it was linebackers and running backs getting one-on-one work. And very first rep was Dre Greenlaw versus J.K. Dobbins, and he was getting in coverage, getting in phase, working up the sideline there, and then he kind of pulled up a little bit. It wasn't anything noticeable, but pulled up with an apparent injury, walked it off for a little bit, and then jogged off the field into the locker room. We didn't see him come back out, and this definitely, I think, perks Broncos Country's ears up a little bit. There's probably some sign for concern just because another injury here.
Well, and I know Sean Payton after practice kind of took issue with that, right? We know Sean is tapped into what people are saying, and he's tapped into what people are saying about the linebacker position, where he took issue with the fact that somebody called it injury prone, that position group as in general, or, just struggling with injuries like that early on. And he kind of pointed out, yeah, Singleton's going to be back in like 6 days, this, that, and the other. And to me, Cody, I'm thinking to myself, like, everybody saw this coming, sadly. Like, nobody wants anybody to get injured. Nobody's trying to like manifest a player to get hurt so that they can be replaced on the roster and the Broncos will have to make changes. But all throughout the course of the offseason, you and I talked about this. You signed a guy who's been injured the past couple of years. You bringing back a guy who's been injured the past couple of years. And then Drew Sanders was injured just last year. And sure enough, we're barely 1 week into training camp, and all three of those guys are already dealing with stuff, and it's not related to the other stuff that they've dealt with. So it's adding on top. It's very concerning to me. Like, I don't understand why the Broncos aren't bringing other guys in. I know they brought in some sort of, like, I hate to call them this, but like, camp body types for tryouts, and I don't think anybody was signed. But look, it's one of those position groups to where you're really concerned about the regular season right now. You hope for the breakout from Lavelle Bailey. Justin Sternad can give you snaps, but at this point, you're 3 guys down at the position. And it's just crazy that we talked about this all offseason and no contingencies were brought in. Here we are. We're dealing with exactly what we feared, and to the guy who's supposed to be the game changer for the middle of that defense.
Well, and those contingencies were Drew Sanders and, Justin Sternad. Drew Sanders goes down. That impacts things. Singleton, more so I'd say in comparison to, Dre Greenlaw or even Drew Sanders at this point. Singleton was back at the team facility in a jersey. He'll return to practice next week. He's not necessarily a guy you're worried about long-term, right? And I know that people are going to be eyeing him when he returns, because he had the ACL last year, has the finger injury, has surgery. And I think people are like, oh, Singleton's always hurt. Like, no, that's not the case. I don't think that narrative is true to apply to Singleton here. He suffered a freak injury last year, played through an entire game with it, by the way, which is crazy to think about. But then just the finger injury, it's an anomaly at this point. But the fact that he's going to be back next week is good, right? But this is where I say the Broncos should absolutely have caution when it comes to this room is, all right, are you teetering on the line of should we press the button to say, okay, hey, we need to do something different just because we need to add another contingency plan, or are we going to risk staying the course, right? Dre Greenlaw, according to Sean, is going to be fine. We'll see where he's at. I mean, I imagine he probably won't practice on Thursday, but stranger things happen. We'll see when obviously, practice rolls around on Friday here for Denver. But my thing that I'm looking at here with this position room specifically is, okay, you're going to see an extended look at Lavelle Bailey, Justin Sternad. That's great. But are guys like Corene Reed, J.B. Brown, Jordan Turner, are those guys you can carry onto the 53-man roster this year? And if there are injuries, are those guys that you feel like can step in and do what you need to be, what needs to be done at the linebacker position? I think there's a massive drop-off when it comes to, like, we're talking about Dre Greenlaw, Alex Singleton, and I would even say here, that's it. Like, there's a massive drop-off in terms of perception for all the other guys in that room, which I think that's just where maybe we're angling this look, is like, this is the question mark we've had all along at linebacker. If there's an injury, if some guy gets taken out, like, yes, we want to see more Lavelle Bailey, but Lavelle is to get, continuing to get more experience and more reps. It doesn't mean that in the regular season he has to step up. It doesn't mean that you're going to get the same results. You better be confident in your player development process and knowing that these guys are further along than maybe most people may think. But yeah, I think the linebacker outlook right now is definitely, a reason I'd say on a scale of 1 to 10, Sayre, I'm at about maybe like a 6.5 on the panic scale in a sense. Where are you at here in Broncos country? Where are you as you're listening or watching the show?
I think I'll push it up to a 7 or an 8. And I think that, look, it's that position group was so detrimental down the stretch last season that I don't think it can really be overstated. Now, I do think you got some much needed experience from Justin Sternad, and you have a potential breakthrough player in Lavelle Bailey. So you may have things now that you didn't have necessarily last year, where Justin really didn't have that time on task and Lavelle Bailey wasn't getting the reps in the defense. I think at this point, though, signing somebody would be reactive by the team, and it would be perceived in a very negative way for two potential big reasons, right? One of the reasons why it would seem negative is because if you sign a veteran now, you're indicating either you believe that this injury to Dre Greenlaw is a bit more serious than anticipated, or you're admitting that you were wrong all along and you should have done something else about it in the past. Now, does that mean that you can't go out and sign somebody? Should the Broncos go sign a Jawan Bentley or a Kaiser White or somebody? I think they should, and I think that those guys might have a chance to play at this point, but I don't like the perception of it now, being that we've talked about it all offseason. They weren't proactive. Now you're forcing yourself to be reactive in a situation or stand your ground, in which case we saw how that worked out last year when you signed Quan Alexander and Zach Cunningham and Christian Welch and all these other guys, because your linebacker position stunk. And Todd Davis isn't going to go out there and play for you. He's a coach. He's not going to play. So you have to have the bodies out there at this point. And that's what's frustrating to me, Cody, is I get the idea. You want the young guys to play. You went out and got Dre Greenlaw. You brought back Sternad. You put Drew Sanders back in the mix. But there needed to be at least one or two more contingencies. You're not drafting guys. When's the last linebacker the Broncos drafted? Drew Sanders was switched to the edge. They haven't drafted any true, dominant off-ball linebackers at the college level for a really long time. So they're not drafting there. They're relying on low price free agent signings. And now you're 2 years in a row reactive at the position. I just don't like it. I think it's one of those things that, to me, you should have done something a couple of months ago.
I think that they're going to stand their ground. And look, I think we're at the early part of the season right now where you're keeping an eye on it, but you're not overtly panicking, right? Like, I'm at a 6.5, you're at 7. I think it's valid to be at those numbers in terms of maybe like, hey, my level of concern right now. But ultimately, I think the goal is to get these guys to the regular season, right? If you're going to have Singleton there, you're going to get Dre Greenlaw there. Can you get them to week 1, and can they stay healthy? I think after the preseason, when you start seeing other roster cuts around the NFL, I think that's where you may see some changes or some additions made specifically, versus right now. I think you're at slim pickings outside of like Bentley, Kaiser White, as you mentioned. I don't think Quan Alexander is signed with the team still. I have to double check on that. But you're in a position right now where I think you don't want to be reactive. I think you want to see things through. And then worst case scenario, if it's not ready by the regular season, then you be reactive and you go out and you do it and you say, you know what, like, we had a plan and it didn't work out the way we wanted to, but we'll see where things are at here in Broncos country. We want to know your thoughts on your level of concern here with Dre Greenlaw as he exited the Thursday's practice with an apparent injury. Don't know the official one, whether it's a hamstring, whether it's a quad, but it was a soft tissue thing. And we'll see where he's at and when he'll return here, according to Sean Payton, who believes He'll be fine. Make sure you let us know here. But we got a lot to talk about here. Some of the highlights of Broncos camp on Thursday included Bo Nix and the Broncos offense having their day after the defense had their day on Wednesday. We'll go through those key standouts and more on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by our friends over there at 5 Hour Energy, and it's time to fuel up and turn it up with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink minus the alcohol into a quick, energizing shot with your sinking birdies or just making memories with friends. This one's a hole-in-one for your energy game, and let's be honest, some days on the course or off it, you just need that extra boost to stay sharp and energized.
You know what, Cody? There was one time I was playing around of golf and I hit a tee shot that was so good. We were looking for my ball forever. I'm like, I can't find my ball, but it felt so good off the tee box. It was right on the fringe of the green on a par 4. I hit it so well. I never have a shot like that again, right? But golf is all about the good times with the good people that you spend it with. And of course, the good flavors. And the grape, ginger, lime flavor from 5 Hour Energy gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without chasing down the bev cart. And if you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that's the number 5hourenergy.com. You can use my promo code LOCKEDONGOLF to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Whether you're meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion flavored 5 Hour Energy shots today. It was about time for the offense to slap back. The defense has been having their way for the first few days of training camp with the pads on, and the offense finally had a really, really good day. We'll tell you about Bo Nix, a couple of other playmakers stepping up out there at Broncos training camp. But Broncos Country, thanks so much for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day every single day here at Locked On Broncos. We appreciate you so much. If you haven't already done so, hit subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts as well as on YouTube. Cody, you were out there watching practice, obviously, and I think Broncos Country will be thrilled to know that Bo Nix had a big day out there. Of course, the second-year quarterback has been just drawing rave reviews from everybody, all the national media that I see that's out there visiting practice. They're talking about how differently he carries himself. I know you talked about earlier this offseason, like he's bigger, stronger, feels like he's carrying a different level of presence with him as this team's unquestioned starting quarterback. What did you see from him out there today as the offense maybe had its first big win of the day at training camp?
Yeah, the emphasis for the day really was kind of third down. You go third and short, third and long, but also red zone. So kind of a combination of what they did on Wednesday when the defense was kind of dominating the day a little bit and making their presence felt when the pads came on. But you saw Bo and the offense come out there today, and they were slinging it. And look, hey, third and short period, Bo's firing the ball downfield, and he's connecting with guys. You know, I just think that this confidence that we've seen from him, you're not seeing thinking, and you're not seeing that hesitation where it's like you're trying to see something develop from a play standpoint from your routes against certain coverages. Last year as a rookie, you could see him maybe anticipating and wondering when it was going to develop, right? Well, now he knows where things are going, and he says, okay, he's being able to read the field to a point where if his first read is not there, he can jump to a second read, and he can maybe see where the safeties align and say, okay, if this window is going to be right here, I know the receiver is going to be there. He's firing it into windows with anticipation. We're seeing him fired into windows, tight windows in front of linebackers and right behind linebackers, right in front of safeties. He's not scared to test that out and to go down there. But his placement, his ball placement has been very, very accurate so far here at training camp. And I would say probably this was the best overall day for the offense on Thursday. And really it stems from him just trying to go out there and make plays. Let's talk about the emphasis that they had here. We talk about red zone. Well, in 7-on-7 red zone period that they had earlier, you know, Bo and the offense, the first team guys only get 4 plays, right? And then Stidham and Ellinger, those guys get 4 plays exclusively themselves. Bo had 2 touchdown passes in the red zone period. First play of 7-on-7 red zone, he found Marvin Mims. There's a beautiful throw right over the top where really only Marvin could get it, right? You talk about the back corner of the end zone, the ball over Marvin's head where he has to track it and get both feet in. That's one thing that I've noticed with Bo is his outside high trajectory placement. It's fun. It's exciting to watch. Joe Burrow carved up the Broncos with throws like that. Bo's got that in his arsenal right now, which is exciting. And then he found Caleb Lohner, Sayre. for a touchdown in the 7-on-7 period. And then he went on in the team period that Denver had, obviously later on to round things out on the day. Red zone period here once again, final team period. Courtland, first play was looking for, Bo was looking for Courtland in the first play. Pat Surtain broke it up. But on the very next play, he goes right back to him and finds him for a touchdown, kind of in the middle of the field there in that red zone. And then he caps things off with the touchdown pass to RJ Harvey. So just an efficient, commandful day by Bo Nix in the offense here. And a lot of young guys getting their hands on the ball, including Pat Bryant.
That's what really excited me about all of your training camp updates throughout the day, Cody, as I was monitoring on Twitter and things like that, is just to see, okay, Bo Nix throwing to Caleb Lohner, Bo Nix throwing to Pat Bryant, Bo Nix throwing to RJ Harvey. Like, that's the rookie class right there.
Evan Ingram, too.
Evan Ingram. Yeah. So the new guys in general, just getting a lot of run. And just the Marvin Mims update, tracking the ball over the shoulder in the red zone and not just saying, hey, Marvin burned these guys, 40 yards downfield. Like, we're used to him doing that, but we're not used to him tracking the ball as a red zone weapon unless, he's getting the ball quickly on the outside in a wide receiver screen sort of situation. So I really love hearing that Bo is getting all these rookies involved. And we've talked about this. Those young guys are going to rotate up with the top unit because at some point throughout the course of a year, go figure, Sean Payton, who loves to use all these different personnel groupings, he's going to get these guys all involved. So it's going to be a mix and match. It's not that, well, this guy is competing for this guy's starting job. I think especially when it comes to the offense, you can kind of throw that stuff out the window because these guys are all going to play. They're all going to have some sort of a role. They're going to have a package of plays. They're going to have, intentional touches and targets. So that's really what's exciting to me is the success, obviously, in the red zone where Bo Nix was one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL last season. I think top 3 in terms of total efficiency in the red zone, but also spreading the ball around, getting it to different guys. He knows how to do that. He's so good at it. He finds the open receiver and everybody gets a touch. That's what I love so much about those updates.
Well, I'd say the play of the day here for Bo and the Broncos offense, and really for all of practice, Bo found Pat Bryant. It was a beautiful play design deep across the middle of the field. You had Lavelle Bailey underneath in coverage trying to track him, but he found Pat Bryant. He put some arc on this throw, found Pat Bryant for a 20 to 25 plus yard gain where Pat is also tracking the ball over his shoulder and he's hauling it in and he's getting both feet in bounds. And it's like, okay, hey, the Broncos, they've got options. And that's a good thing too, because even I have to give some flowers to the undrafted guys. This is going to be hard for, I think, this year's crop of UDFAs to make the 53 unless there's some crazy injury or something like that. But Joaquin Davis had himself a really impressive day. He's had a really strong camp so far. Kyrie's Rowan had a bounce back day after having a drop yesterday. And then going to Courtney Jackson had a big play downfield from Sam Ellinger in the middle of, attacking the heart of the defense. The safeties probably for a 20 to 25 plus yard gain as well. But Pat Bryant takes the cake for the best play of the day overall here for the Broncos. I don't even say too, gonna bring Audric Esteme's name up here once again, because Audric, all the pressure that has kind of been placed on him since OTAs and, obviously looking at the draft, he is stacked, in my opinion, 3 very impressive days in a row here at running back. So it makes things very interesting to see how this is going to go, because even Sean Payton was asked about Jaleel McLaughlin and identified him specifically as a change of pace back. That's starting to maybe make me feel like they're going to start carrying 4 guys on the 53, but things still have to play out though. I still think 4 is very much on the table here.
Yeah, I do too. The more he talks about these running backs, the more he talks about not wanting to lose guys to other teams. That's where I'm headed as well. And you talk about the quarterback position and having 2 guys there on your 53-man roster at the very least, that gives you flexibility. I know it's only 1 spot, but it just changes the entire way that you want to build that roster and that you can go about doing that, especially offensively, where you can keep, because last year the Broncos had, I think, 5 backs at one point on their roster, Cody, and that doesn't include fullback Michael Burton. So there's a lot of different ways that you can slice this thing before we get to the start of the regular season. There's ways the Broncos can manipulate the roster rules by cutting guys, bringing some veterans back to the practice squad and shuffling them up. Like, you can do that with a number of different guys nowadays. And so there's ways that you can keep your talented young players without subjecting them to waivers. I think ultimately when you talk about assembling your top 53, there's no way, in my opinion, that Audric Estime can't be part of that based on where he's at right now in training camp and kind of just what the team felt about him when they drafted him. You got to see that investment through.
I kind of view it as Jalil being that change of pace designation. He'll be a third back, but I really think if they were going to keep four, I think that competition really is between Audric Estime, Tyler Bidet, and Blake Watson, who Blake has also had himself an impressive 2 days in a row here. And then obviously, I think the preseason game is going to be very important for determining how the rest of the evaluation goes, who makes it, how that competition plays out. I know I'm excited to continue to watch that. We're just 9 days away from the Broncos being able to play a preseason game. It's almost here, Broncos country. But we're not done yet here on today's episode show. We still have a lot to break down, including some camp notes with the return of Devon Vele. Did we see Q Robinson come back after missing practice? We'll highlight injury updates and more on today's episode. Locked on Broncos. Today's Locked On Broncos podcast is brought to you by our friends over there at Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? Well, with Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. And it's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, your investments, and your spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth.
Cody, you know, one of the things that my wife and I love to do is go to Disney World. And in order to do that, you have to cut expenditures elsewhere, right? And for me, that a big thing was eating out, buying a bunch of coffee outside of the house. So with Monarch Money, obviously we can see where all of our money is being spent in one place, and you can make adjustments to start saving for the things that you want or the experiences that you want to have. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
As the Broncos took the field on Thursday for day 4 of pads, we saw the return of Devon Vele at wide receiver after he missed Wednesday's practice. But some other injuries are impacting other areas of this Broncos team, as we've talked about here. We'll dive deeper into what that looks like, and also a newcomer to the roster after an injury, sidelined an undrafted rookie player who had a lot of chances to make some noise and maybe factor himself into a potential rotation at the outside linebacker position. We'll break all that down here on today's episode of the show. Sayre, let's talk about injuries. Obviously, we've highlighted the Dre Greenlaw one. We spent a lot of time on that. Obviously, on Wednesday, we did not see Devon Vele at practice, but he returned on Thursday there. So part of me was wondering, was that more of a load management type of day for a guy like Vele, considering that we didn't even see him? Because typically when a guy has a rest day or a load management day, we see them out there on the practice field. They just won't be dressed in a helmet. They'll have their jersey, but they'll be in shorts or something like that. We didn't see that on Wednesday, but Vele was back in helmet, shoulder pads, and shorts, which was the theme for everybody on the Broncos, obviously on Thursday. So very interesting to see maybe how that dynamic's working, but we did not see Q Robinson once again, who, left practice the other day. He was limping. It was very noticeable for him. 2 days in a row of no Q Robinson, and it's definitely making our ears perk up a little bit.
Yeah, you start to get a little concerned about guys like that when they're disappearing for a couple of days and it's not mentioned, right? And I think that that's the thing about the way that Sean Payton and his staff kind of operate when it comes to injuries. They're very coy about those sorts of things. He doesn't want to bring them up. He doesn't want to give day-to-day updates. Sometimes he'll offer information, and he is clear when he offers that information about what's going on. But certainly with Q Robinson, you felt like he could have a big role this year, whether on special teams only or on special teams and as a rotational rusher, because from mandatory minicamp to the beginning of training camp, it sounded like he was really impressive out there with his first step and spin move and things like that. So he was one of the guys we've been most excited about seeing in pads. And of course, you have another undrafted rookie at that position, right? And it's another one of those things, Cody, where unfortunately your top money guy off the edge, Johnny Walker, going on injured reserve. The Broncos I thought they waived him initially, or it was reported that they waived him initially, but may not. I guess they must not have to waive him in order to get him to IR at this point in time. So they keep him, but he was their highest priced undrafted player this year. So you lose him, and you've got Q Robinson on the mend, hopefully coming back soon, but you got to have somebody out there who can replace him. And the guy that they brought in, Cody, this Garrett Nelson from Nebraska, he seems to be sort of that Q Robinson, skill set where he played in the UFL, dominated on special teams, comes off the edge. I feel like there's maybe an indicator here that there's something more going on with Q Robinson than meets the eye.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see what the timeline is going to be. And look, I think there's certain languages you want to look at, especially here in training camp, right? You place a player on injured reserve during training camp, their season ends. There is no coming off of it at this juncture, right? So for Johnny Walker Jr., I think essentially now he'll have a chance to be in the building all year long, kind of red shirt essentially, get treatment at the team facility, be part of meetings and things like that, which I think are important. So you're gonna have to wait a year to see Johnny Walker Jr. for all my fellow Mizzou folks. I'm a Mizzou grad. But obviously, I think for a guy like Nelson to come into the mix here for the Broncos, yeah, you definitely want to keep an eye on, like, what does this mean? Like, is this something that could sideline Q for several weeks? Because unless it's a serious injury, he would more than likely land on IR if that was the case, right? But the fact that he's not on IR, and maybe they're just taking their time. We don't know what the injury is. I'm just going to say this. Watching him the other day come off the practice field on Tuesday, it was a noticeable limp. Like, you could tell, like, hey, something was wrong. As he's walking up, you're trying not to make eye contact because this is a guy who knows, like, hey, this is the media, but this is a guy who is clearly in discomfort and pain there. So you have to do that. But I like the idea of bringing in, obviously, Garrett Nelson, after playing in the UFL. He's a highly graded, according to some places out there, in terms of being a special teams player. Worst case scenario, I mean, that was the vision here for Q, was to play special teams as a rookie. If something lingers with Q, you may have a guy on your hand that can do that. It was his first day out there. He was wearing Johnny Walker Jr.'s number. So I'm very, very curious to see if this is something we should be concerned about. We're not going to have the information probably just yet.
Yeah, and that's one of those things that they're going to keep it under wraps as long as they possibly can, and then finally somebody's going to probably give an update, and we'll see what happens there. But of course, you wish them well, and you want to see the new guy do well, right? I mean, there's always an opportunity when you get players coming up from other professional leagues, as the Broncos did last year with Dandre Tilman. I know he was in the program for a bit longer than Garrett Nelson will have been, but still a very intriguing potential pickup here in terms of what they were able to do last year and how well Jamar Cain has worked with these guys off the edge. And that's important to note here, is that the distinction between, he's being listed as a linebacker by some reports, he's an outside linebacker in this defense. He's an edge guy in the defense. That's what he played at Nebraska, Cody. I remember watching him. I remember watching a number of Nebraska games with this number 44 coming off the edge. He's got some decent agility to him, decent explosiveness to him, and obviously he's kind of a gamer out there. So somebody that you feel like can upgrade your 90-man roster for the time being and maybe make some noise here as we get into joint practices and the preseason.
And I know sometimes we forget about it just because I think we're so focused on the top names at that position. The Broncos also still have Andrew Farmer on the roster. He was on the practice squad last year for Denver, came over from the LA Chargers. So we'll see where things are at as the Broncos continue to navigate the ups and downs of what is training camp life. And you're going to run into some injuries, some bumps and bruises, but hopefully this is not something that lingers or persists with some of these guys that we've talked about. And hopefully we see Dre Greenlaw back on the practice field tomorrow here for the Broncos. But Broncos Country, we appreciate you so much for rocking with us, making us your first listen. You can catch us every single day wherever you get your podcasts, or on YouTube. We're also on TikTok. So if you want some short form content where we break it down, consumable for you on the go, TikTok is a great place to get involved. Go follow us, Locked On Broncos. Sayre Bedinger, myself, we'll be back tomorrow as we break down Friday's training camp practice that'll set up what we believe is going to be a scrimmage-like setting on Saturday for the Broncos. Stay locked in here at Locked On Broncos.